what you always need to have in mind is what are the minimum requirements you need to fulfill in terms of regulatory and quality. And whenever you develop a process and you're uncertain of quality or regulatory requirements, it's often good to get support. Either you speak to the regulatory agencies directly or get some consultants in that help you. Because at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to develop a safe product in your clinical testing. You don't want to put any patients at risk. So this always has to be the number one aim.
Hey, smart biotech scientists, welcome back. Many companies struggle to advance their scientific breakthroughs to clinical development and ultimately commercialization. And we are in the middle of a conversation to help you facilitate the transition from discovery into clinical testing. And to do that, I invited Matthias Müllner, who is the CEO and co-founder of Bespark Bio, a company empowering viral vector-based medicines. And if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, please go back, because today we are continuing our journey about developing a solid CMC strategy and effectively leverage quality by design. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics at market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Let's shift gear, Matthias, and let's talk about another critical element, which is the quality by design, because this is important to implement that early in the development cycle. And it's gaining traction. And yet I must say our industry has been very conservative and probably not leveraged the full potential yet. Can you shed some light on the benefit of quality by design for biotech?
Sure. So quality by design, when you look at the principles of it, and as the name says, it's really about designing quality into processes rather than testing it into. And at the end of the day, what you want to achieve is producing high quality, safe products consistently. And how can you do that is by process understanding. So you need to understand product understanding. You need to understand what parameters affect my quality and my safety. So you need to know your critical quality attributes. And you also need to understand what process parameters affect these critical quality attributes. And once you have this understanding, then you can put a design space around these parameters, and then you understand, okay, once my parameters are within this design space, they do not affect my quality attributes as long as they are within this design space. Then you have a good understanding what happens in your process, and as long as you are not outside of this design space, then your product is still of a high quality. And that's what you really want. The principles of QBD, they are pretty old, and they've first come up in the 1990s, and then they've been implemented in the ICH regulations since 2010 with multiple reversions since then. But typically, the idea was bringing in this as a market authorization approach. But when you look at the basics of this quality by design approach, it's really about process understanding. So getting a better process understanding. And when you have this mindset already early on in your process development activities, you can really leverage this by really bringing up phase-appropriate, robust manufacturing processes. Because as soon as you know what's affecting my quality attributes in my process, what are the critical process parameters, then you can predominantly focus on those parameters early on. So you don't need to do kind of a shotgun approach where you just play around in the lab and look at the various parameters. You do a lot of experiments, and afterwards you realize, these experiments have not increased my process understanding, they are not critical, so then you do another set of experiments. And the sooner you really bring this mindset in, and you don't have to do a full QBD approach right from the beginning, but at least take the advantages of it and bring this mindset in that you can really bring a lot of added value into your process development approach. And at the end of the day, again, this can grow, and then you have a strong basis where you then can further develop your process throughout your clinical development program. And you said it's often not used to full potential, because what happens in reality, no one is doing QBD because it sounds so complicated. And at the end of the day, it's a bit more complex as I just explained it, but it's not rocket science at the end of the day. It's really about this product process understanding that you need to generate. But when companies start implementing this very late, they run into the problem that they can't use the process development data because the experiments haven't been designed in the right way. They have not used any DOEs. So they have to redo a lot of those experiments. And this can be time consuming and cost intensive. And that's why I think, at least often, it's really not used so commonly. And this can also be the challenge for these biotechs, because you need some understanding of process development, and you need some prior knowledge, let's put it like that, to implement this. And this can be also in process development at the early days, time consuming and resource intensive.
Smart biotech scientists, building process understanding is absolutely key. And again, you're making a good point, Matthias. You need to start on the right foot, that you generate the right data sets right from the beginning, that the experiments are set up the right way. So you don't have to go back and generate additional data. So there is definitely a huge benefit with QBD. This leads me to another question, Matthias. Are there any potential drawbacks?
Yeah, the drawbacks are, of course, in order to get this process understanding, you need to invest some time and resources. So you have your target product profile, but then you need your quality target product profile. You need to identify, and you need to understand your CQAs, and you need kind of a basic process, because you need to do a risk assessment of your process that you have, and then look at every single parameter, and then based on your risk assessment, evaluate whether this process parameter is critical or not. Does it have an impact on your CQA? So it can be a lot of work, and often this know-how, these data sets, is not available early on. So this is why companies rather not do it, or because they don't have really the right access to it. And that can be a pitfall. And then if you don't do it right, maybe you spend a lot of time, you're planning, maybe your DOE is not right, and you make wrong interpretations. So it really has to be well thought through and well designed. Also, when it comes to statistics, you need people who really help you to design your DOEs if you can't do it on your own, not just using any tool you find on the internet, but really, because there's so much value in this, so you should not really make this wrong, because if you make a wrong interpretation out of that, this can go in the wrong direction.
And this is a good point, because there's a lot of risk involved in the whole development cycle. Can you share some best practices for the identification and mitigation of the risks?
Yes, in terms of risk mitigation, what you always need to have in mind is what are the minimum requirements you need to fulfill in terms of regulatory and quality. And whenever you develop a process and you're uncertain of quality or regulatory requirements, it's often good to get support. Either you speak to the regulatory agencies directly, or get some consultants in that help you. Because at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to develop a safe product in your clinical testing. You don't want to put any patients at risk. So this always has to be the number one aim. And you always have to look from this perspective, really, is, do I have enough understanding, enough knowledge to ensure that what I'm going to produce in my clinical batch is safe enough? So you have to look at all the specifications that are required. If there are no regulatory specifications, you need to build your own, and of course they can be broader at the beginning and you can narrow them down. But it's really about this safety, quality driven mindset that you should bring in, and always challenge your decisions based on that, because at the end of the day you have one shot at this. So it's very time and cost intensive, and if you don't get it right, it will be very difficult to get another round of funding if your GMP batch fails, or if your clinical trial fails, because the material that you manufactured if you're manufacturing non-robust manufacturing process, maybe is not comparable to the material you have produced in your preclinical studies. And so it's really, again, I like this phase appropriateness. So really think it as a step-by-step approach. Make sure that you do your first things first. You don't need to do everything right from the beginning, but you need to take a risk-based assessment and approach to identify the risks. And at the beginning, the risks that there are is really manufacturing risks. So what can you do that your GMP batch doesn't fail? And the other one would be really, what can you do that your product is safe in your clinical testing?
To simplify this journey from scientific breakthroughs to clinical development, your company has a unique approach of integrating bioprocessing expertise, state-of-the-art technology, digitalization, and machine learning. Can you tell us how you do that and how your approach has created an efficiency and a much better process understanding?
So I've been working in vaccine development for over a decade, and I've experienced a lot of these difficulties I just mentioned. And what we try to do now is really how can we leverage our experience and expertise in order to provide a solution to other companies who develop viral vector-based medicines to be more efficient in their development approach, in their process development. Because of course, there's one way you could say you need to do more process development work, you need to invest more time and money, but no one will do that because all the companies, they need to generate clinical data fast. So if you can't spend more time and resources, why not try to make the time and resources that are available anyways more efficient? And we try to do this by leveraging prior knowledge. And by that, what we do is we really pre-develop unit operations or whole process streams for different viral vectors and generate a process understanding there. This can be seed trains, production phases, upstream, in the upstream or purification technologies in the downstream. And while we develop those unit operations, we generate a lot of data. And we use this data for data modeling, hybrid modeling. So we use our data to make these hybrid models, which are a combination of mechanistical models and machine learning. So we have virtual model, a digital twin of these process steps and these unit operations. And together, so these predefined building blocks, unit operations with our models, we use this as a decision support tool to help to design experiments, process development experiments for our customers right from the first time. So really what you typically would do, as I said earlier, you do a lot of experiments and afterwards you find out you have looked at the wrong parameters because this does not increase your process understanding. And with our tool, we really try to pick the potential critical process parameters before we go into the lab. So it's like a crystal ball situation where we really look at our different models, our unit operations, our prior knowledge, and then we select those parameters that we, based on this prior knowledge that we have, that we think most likely have an effect. And then we only design our DOEs around those parameters. And by that, we really save a lot of time doing experiments in the lab which do not increase your process understanding. So this is really the first thing that we do. And then once we have customer-specific data from these process experiments, then we can use the data again to build a customer-specific hybrid model, digital twin, if you will. And then we can use, again, the customer-specific model to further define the development strategy. And so we have now generated some proof of concept data with a viral vector-based vaccine, where we really could show that we can reduce experimental resources to 30 to 40%.
Oh, wow, that's massive. That's impressive. Now, there are a lot of moving parts, obviously. I mean, we talked about the CMC, we talked about managing all the regulatory requirements, and especially in the viral vector space, there's still a lot of innovation going on. And at the same time, you want to be fast in process development. So what is your vision at your company? How do you manage this tension and how do you navigate that? And through technology, through collaboration, through anything, like what is your approach?
So we do have this kind of dual approach. One is this advanced development, how we call it, where we try to leverage prior knowledge to be more efficient in process development. And the other part would be looking at new technologies. Either we develop them on our own or we try to implement new technologies. But new doesn't always mean better. So we really need to get a good understanding of whether this innovation really adds any value or is it just fancy to be used. Because as you're completely right, it's often, especially when you go down the regulatory pathway, it's a very conservative approach and novelty is not always seen as a good thing there. So you need to make really a compromise between what works well for the product and ideally you would bring innovation in, but at the same time, make sure that regulators are also okay with that innovation that you bring in. So there's a lot of innovation ongoing. But before we implement new technologies in our process streams, we carefully evaluate that and try to really get a good understanding whether this really brings the added value as promised. And other things that I see with a lot of potential in the future is really this bringing in machine learning, digitalization, data modeling early on. Digital twins are used for many years in commercial manufacturing, but really bringing those opportunities in process development, this is something which is not happening so often. This can be really a game changer, I'd say, if you bring in these tools which are out there in early on.
Where do you see this going in the future, let's say the next 5 to 10 years? Because, I mean, we live in such exciting times with all the AI and machine learning. There's so many breakthroughs. Pretty much every week we hear news about that. How do you think will the development approach, the CMC development approach, change or improve just because we have new technologies at our disposal?
The CMC sector is not known for being very innovative or reactive to innovations for the past decades. And this is really probably also a problem because there have been so many new technologies, innovations out there, but the way how we develop processes is still the same as it was many years ago, and that did not change a lot. And I think it really needs this paradigm change that also the CMC area gets more innovative. And at least in my vision, I'd see that there is more openness to test new technologies out there, new ways to be more innovative or be more creative. Let's put it like that. Maybe the companies should be more creative at the end of the day, because there's this regulatory body that anyway puts a lot of pressure that a safe product is coming out there, but as long as you fulfill that, so you could bring in new technologies as well. But it's a tough one, so I'm myself curious how this will play out. But this is what we try to change, at least on our end. We try to bring in new technologies, innovation, and make this available to our customers. And they actually, at the end of the day, they don't need to care about this because we are the experts on that. So we take care of this, we bring in the innovation, and they get the benefits out of that. If this plays out, I'm curious, but I'm confident, so I know what data modeling can provide, the added value of that. But how then this can be taken further down the road in terms of how can you use in silico data generated from process development, digital models, digital twins, how can you support clinical trial application of filings, how regulators are going to react to that. I think this is going to be interesting as well.
As we're wrapping up, Matthias, what is the most important takeaway from our conversation?
I think that we are in a good position, I'd say, in terms of bringing in new innovation, making process development more efficient, but that we still have a long way to go. Again, it's really this mindset that needs to be built, that CMC should not be underestimated or ignored from the beginning. It should be taken care of, maybe in a step-by-step, phase-appropriate approach.
Where can people connect with you, Matthias?
So they can either look me up on LinkedIn. Hopefully soon they will be able to find our webpage because we are going to launch this in May. Until then, LinkedIn or via email, they can directly reach me.
Fantastic. I'm going to leave all these links down in the show note. Please do reach out to Matthias. And Matthias, thank you so much for sharing all your insights and being on the show today.
Thank you, David. Thanks for the invitation. It was great talking to you.
Hey, smart biotech scientists. Thank you very much for tuning in today. What did you think about today's episode? Please tell us by leaving a review. And perhaps you are not so sure where you should start so that your transition from discovery into clinical testing will be smooth. Don't worry, because we want to partner with you and we want to give you the clarity you need so you can develop biologics with peace of mind. Just use the link down in the show notes, book a free call with us, and we will help you get started. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.